Next, we'll talk through code deployment requirements. So essentially, whenever you write out your requirements, you want to make sure that you're including your requirements around code storage and deployment. What we mean by code storage and deployment is, well, for code storage, do you have your developers or want your developers to push code to a code repository? So some popular examples of this are GitHub, Bitbucket, GitLab. There are many others that are out there as well. Some of these are hosted. Some of these are repositories that you install on your own servers. Essentially, it's a good idea to have your code pushed to a centralized code repository. This ensures that if you have multiple developers working on your project, that they're all working off of the same code base. You don't want somebody to, have their own code base, somebody else, has their own, and then when it comes time to merging everything together, everybody's going back and forth. Hey, do you have this function? Do you have that function? Where is this? Where is that? And, everything breaks when you're trying to assemble it all together. If you have a centralized repository with the code, everybody's working off of the same code base. So if I'm writing certain functions and, I'm asking you if you have the same thing, I don't have to ask you. I know based on what I see in that central repository. And everyone just pushes their own changes. There's full audit trail of, who pushed what change. If, a feature breaks something else, who did that and when it was done. So that way you know when to revert your code back to. Along the deployment requirements, do you have CI/CD requirements? So CI and CD stand for continuous integration and continuous deployment. This allows you to build pipelines in place where, once a developer pushes code to the code repository, for example, it can automatically run any automated tests you have against it. If it passes all of those tests, it pushes it to a development server where somebody, can go in and test out the features or spot check some of the functionality and really just kick the tires on it and make sure that there are no bugs in the code. Again, you want to talk through, are you requiring automated tests to run prior to pushing the code to the server? If you are requiring automated tests, which ones and what are they going to test for? Things like that. You want to make sure that you have all clearly outlined in your requirement document. Also, how often and when does the production server get updated with the latest code? And we'll talk through what I mean by development server, production server, etc. In the coming slide here. But essentially, you want to make sure that you're outlining what is the standard procedure and order of operations, and ensuring that we get to, somebody codes a new feature, how does it get into the live application that end users are going to be connecting to. And also, any type of manual testing that is required prior to pushing it to a live environment. You want to make sure that, just because you've written a lot of, automated tests doesn't mean that you've accounted for every single type of issue that could happen. Sometimes, there are, issues that you don't see until you're, clicking around in different, screens of the application and doing certain actions, in order, out of order, things like that. So you want to make sure that you have the right mix of automated testing and manual testing as well. So in terms of server setup, I alluded to this on the last slide with development servers, production servers. What's considered the best practice is to have 3 different environments for where your code is deployed: a development server, a test server, and a production server. Now, many organizations, have different numbers of environments. There are some that I've seen might have 5 or 6 environments that you've got to go through before, the change is pushed to a live environment. And other organizations, have as little as 2, but you should have at least 2 environments, if not more. So when I say development or dev, this is where any active development is performed. I want to create a new feature. I do it in my dev environment. Once the feature is coded and built, and I've done my own unit testing, which just means that I've gone through and tested that individual feature to make sure that it works, then you push the changes to a test server. So what this does is this proves that migrating the code doesn't give any types of errors in terms of pushing that latest code to a new server, and then you have application testing that's performed there. So you may have automated tests that are performed between when you're pushing it to the test server. You might have users manually, or power users or testers manually testing features and making sure that nothing is broken, but essentially they're going into that test environment to make sure that everything is valid. Any changes that have to get made, like, hey, I found a bug with this, well, developer fixes it in the development environment, does their own unit testing on it, pushes it to a test environment, and then the tester goes and validates that the problem is resolved. Once everything is working as expected, the changes are pushed to a production or prod environment. Some people and organizations refer to it as live, which just means that this is what's going to be used. This has real data in the system. You might have sample data in your dev and test environment, but this has your actual users every day logging into the application, and real data in here. So you want to make sure that you're only pushing your updated code to this environment when it's been